Hey, have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Well, Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. And best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. I love it for the simple fact that it brings the sponsors to you. You don't have to search for them, and they distribute it to all the major platforms for you. So if you want to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start. Again, anchor.fm/START to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. And that's it. Let's go.
Allow me to reintroduce myself. Now tuned into the greatest.
Supreme on the track. What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Supreme Decisions Legal Minute Podcast. Well, today, I'm not sure if you're actually going to notice it, but we're going to have a couple of breaks in addition to the one that starts off the episode every week. Well, today I'm going to get into something that goes into one of the things I talk about constantly, and that's the telling of your side. And I'm going to talk about the irrelevance of it. But first, I'm going to get into a case that was sent to me. And the case that was sent to me was concerning a Marietta, Georgia, because you know I love talking about Georgia. They're actually one of my favorite targets because I experienced a lot of mishaps by police officers and councilmen and DAs and a couple of judges that were there. And this story was sent to me by someone who is not privy to even knowing or exacting anything that deals in law, because they are pretty much a good person. They're very much law-abiding. They're just one of those people. But the question was brought to me was, are they being too simple in what they're looking at? Now, you know me, of all people, I always talk about how the police do not turn over body camera footage. And if they do, it's because they think they're right. And 90% of the time, they're not. But there is that 10%. And unfortunately, because I am absolutely the first person to point out police misconduct, police ignorance, anything that the police does that's not above bar. And if I'm going to reprimand these people for not doing the things that they're supposed to correctly, I've also got to praise them when they actually do something correct. And that's what this situation that I'm getting ready to go into is about. But this situation gives life to what I'm going to fully speak about today. So, grasp on the points of this first part, because it'll make more sense to you as we go along. And basically what happened was a Marietta councilman, Reggie Copeland, speaks about his May 2019 traffic incident to which he was taken into police custody. He was arrested from a traffic accident. And the baseline of this was at this press conference. He stood up in front of hundreds of people and said, "I was in fear for my life." This is one of the things that I absolutely hate, because one of the things that I always talk about is if you're in fear for your life, if there is an actual fear for your life, your body language coincides with your statements. His body language did not coincide with his statements. And this Marietta councilman, you know what? This is one of those where I talk about entitlement. But here's where it's even more hilarious. I'm watching this video, which is police body camera. I actually went back and I watched the full body camera because at first I was sent the context of the editorial that was done by the newspaper, which was the Marietta Daily. So shout out to them. So the Marietta Daily News Journal or something similar to that. But shout out to them because they did an excellent job on this. Because when you're looking at it from the vantage point of when it starts and how it escalates, I sat there for 15 minutes waiting for the police to do something wrong. I'm still sitting here waiting for the police to do something wrong. Now, let me give you a little bit of context of this story. When the body camera comes on, he's actually the second officer that's on the scene. The first officer pretty much takes everybody, he's stopping traffic, kind of rerouting them around the accident. Now, if you ask, was there damage to property? Yes. But from the camera's view, it appeared to be very minor to non-existent. However, the people that was involved in the incident, they originally stated that they did hit him. So there's no question that there was damage to property. So now the police officer has some work to do. Well, when he was examining the truck that Reggie Copeland was in, Reggie Copeland was blocking the entire lane with his truck. The police officer asked him, hey, just pull off to the side so we can get traffic going and, we'll go ahead and see what we need to do from this point. Well, Mr. Copeland states that he could not get his truck started. So the police officer then says, hey, get in and put it in neutral, and I'll help you push it out the way. Well, here's where the fun begins. Because Mr. Copeland gets into the truck, police officer goes behind the truck. The police officer begins to push. Mr. Copeland at no point puts the truck in neutral. So the police officer, after a couple seconds of noticing that the truck isn't doing anything, he walks up and says, hey, do you mind putting the truck in neutral so we can get it out the way? Mr. Copeland is now on the phone with some random person. Nobody in particular, just a random ass person. So he goes, I'm doing that. Mr. Copeland states to the police officer, I'm doing that. Now, here's where it gets funny. And I do mean it the same way I just said that. Here's where it gets funny. The police officer restates, hey, go ahead and put it in neutral and I'll push it while you're on the phone. So Mr. Copeland then puts both feet into the truck and continues his phone conversation. And at no point does he even motion to putting the phone down or the truck in neutral. Police officer even states that, hey, that's not putting it in neutral, man. Let's go ahead so we can get it out the way. So then the police officer is becoming agitated, as would anybody, because now it's like you're dealing with a 3-year-old. So Mr. Copeland is still sitting on the phone, not listening. So the police officer, because Mr. Copeland's feet are inside the truck, the police officer proceeds to close the door. Mr. Copeland sticks his foot back into the door and then tells the police officer, hey, you're hurting me. Police officer goes, what do you mean? He said, well, my foot's here in the door. Police officer says to Mr. Copeland, hey, it wasn't just there. I'm trying to close the door anyway so we can go ahead and reroute this traffic around this incident until we can get your truck moved. So the police officer tells another officer, hey, call a tow truck so we can go ahead and get it at least moved out the way. So in the midst of conversating, Mr. Copeland hangs up the phone. And they're having a conversation in reference to the accident. Yes, this is being a little long-winded, but I want you to understand something, because I want you to understand every context of this incident. And then you're going to understand why I'm agitated by the actions of Reginald Copeland. So in the context of this, Mr. Copeland still has not moved his truck, still has not put it in neutral, but he is now engaged with the police officer. And the police officer asked him, while they're looking for damage, he doesn't see any damage. Mr. Copeland says, hey, they did this, and I want them to be cited. The police officer turns to him and says, okay, there's very little damage. Do you really want to add this to your Carfax and devalue your vehicle? Mr. Copeland says, yes, I want a citation done. I want this done. I want a police report done. He said, okay, if I do the report, that's what's going to happen. This is what we're going to go. So he said, so may I have your license and insurance? Mr. Copeland then picks up the phone again. He goes, okay, I'll get that for you. But at no point does he reach for anything to gather for the police officer after he initiated. Police officer asks again, hey, can I get your license and insurance? Ms. Copeland is now on the phone with 911. So Mr. Copeland says to the officer, hey, why don't you go over there and give them a ticket? He said, well, first, I'm standing here with you. I'm getting your side of the story, and then I'm going to go over to them. Ms. Copeland still has not made an effort to get anything that he has originally initiated. He then tells the officer, I'm on the phone. So, okay, cool. The officer stands there. He said, well, while you're on the phone, go ahead and grab your ID and your insurance information. Ms. Copeland at no point does that. And he then tells the 911 operator, oh, I'm here with this police officer, and he's not citing the other party. Police officer then says, hey, I'm actually in the middle of the investigation. I'm beginning this investigation with you. Mr. Copeland goes on to ignore him and then immediately begins to exasperate the situation, because at the end of the day, Mr. Copeland asked for the police officer to do the investigation. Mr. Copeland asked for the police officer to do his job. The police officer obliged him by starting the investigation, by starting what his job was, right? Which was taking into account of what happened, because in all instances, Mr. Copeland is the injured party. Mr. Copeland is the one that has to set up the complaint. Mr. Copeland is the one that has to initiate everything. But until that happens, the police officer can't do anything. So in the midst of all this, the police officer again is being agitated, because at this point we're about 12-15 minutes into the video. So in the midst of the conversation on 911, Mr. Copeland cranks up his truck and drives off. Yes, the truck that would not crank, the truck that was blocking the highway, the truck that Mr. Copeland did not want to put in neutral. He now cranks it up, drives it out of the way into the parking spot in which the police officer had asked him initially. So then the police officer drives over to him, gets out the car, and again begins his investigation for a second time. So keep in mind, Mr. Copeland still has not gotten his ID, still not gotten his insurance information. He now calls the chief of police because he's upset that the police officer isn't taking his complaint. Now, going through all of this, the long and short began with this young man being in a car accident, right? Seemed to be minor because it didn't look like any damage was done to the other car. Very little damage was done to Mr. Copeland's car. And 20 minutes in, the police officers don't even know who this dude is. They have no clue who he is. Why? Because he has not turned over any information. He has not said anything that allowed them to understand who he is. The police chief then says, go ahead and arrest him. So now the police officers are asking Mr. Copeland to get out the vehicle, out of his truck. And Mr. Copeland goes, I'm a city councilman of Marietta. So 20 minutes in, after all of this bullshitting, he now tells them who he is. So after 20 minutes, these people now know he is a city councilman. Now they have grounds to arrest him. Now, here's the greatest part about this. This happened May 24th, 2019. He was arrested. Mr. Copeland was arrested. Mr. Copeland was sentenced as a first offender. Mr. Copeland was then ordered to go to anger management. Now, here's the tee-hee for me. He sat there and did things because he felt he was entitled to those things. He felt that he could do whatever the hell it is he wanted to. Not even after initiating the police investigation. He chose not to do what he asked somebody else to do, but wanted them to do something that was outside the guidelines of what the state could allow them to do. And then he wanted special privileges for it. And then after it was done, he pled guilty. He didn't fight. He didn't fight it because he pled guilty. And in the midst of pleading guilty, he complied with the judgment from the judge, which was very lenient. And now he's saying that these police brutalized him. Now, when I first watched this, I am the absolute first person to hold them accountable. I am the first person to nitpick. The thing that pissed me off was the fact that I was actually surprised by the Marietta Police Department for not beating his ass. That I was absolutely dumbfounded. I was in shock. I was flabbergasted. Because for every intent and purpose, I'm pretty sure a regular person would have gotten the hell beat out of them for doing what he did. The problem is they didn't even know who he was for 20 minutes. And they still did not treat him like he was anything else other than a human being. That was hard-headed as shit. And his actions were that of a child. But here's where I want to go into the context of his behavior. It was the fact that he decided he wanted to tell his side. He decided that he was more important than the actual incident itself. And that is where a lot of us get caught up at. I am now going to give you, when I come back, the whole context of why I constantly say, don't send in an affidavit. Nobody cares about your side. And I'm going to give you court cases that go along with that. So, think about that for right now. And listen to this message. All right, welcome back after that brief break. Well, we were talking about Reginald Copeland. And I want to talk about the rationale of your side. Because most of us have no clue of why I'm so adamant about not even going into this stuff. It's because, like, I hate to go into these old cliches, but they're actually relevant because nobody cares. Nobody cares about how you feel, what was done to you. Only thing they care about is who did it, what they do, And what is it that you're looking for? Because even when you were a kid, what's one thing you tell children? Stop tattletelling. I don't care about all that. What happened? Just tell me exactly what happened. Don't tell me your side. Tell me what happened. And that's all everybody cares about. Tell me what happened. Because that's how we're programmed. We don't give a shit about the detail because the devil is in the details. We don't care about it. So why would now, as an adult, you expect 12 other adults to actually care about something you yourself didn't care about? So, whenever I spoke a while back regarding going to court, I spoke about only the accuser has to show proof of the accusation. They're the only ones to have to prove anything. And the beautiful part of that is law actually coincides with that. Because most people didn't even know that if you shut up and make them do their job, the right to remain silent, they have to prove everything that they're saying. I'm going to say that one more time. If you have self-discipline and the wherewithal to just shut up and make them do their job, a lot of the extra stops because only the accuser has to prove their side. Your side doesn't matter. And even to go deeper into that, I'm going to give you the context of a legal proceeding. Okay, let's say you get up, you go through all the questioning and answering. Who sends you over discovery? The accuser. Why? Because they have to show you the evidence that they have against you, or lack thereof. Now we get through all this other stuff. You pick voir dire, the jury's set up, you have your alternates and all that good stuff. Who gets to speak first? The accuser. Who generally has the longest time setting up their case? The accuser. Why? Because every witness against you is coming in behalf of the accuser. 98% of all criminal trials are set up where the majority of the time is spent on setting up the accusation, not the defense. And even in that criminal trial, who gets to speak last? The accuser. So not only does the accuser speak first, the accuser speaks longest, the accuser speaks last. At what point are we talking about the defense? Because what most people don't even realize, in most civil lawsuits, defense often never takes a stand to defend themselves. Why? Because they know their side is irrelevant. The focus is on the proof that's set up by the accuser. I'm going to say that one more time. In most civil trials, the defendants often never take the stand to defend themselves. Because hell, in most murder trials, no one gets on the stand to defend the defendant. A lot of their calling to the stand is to rebut the accuser's accusation. Why? Because the accuser's accusations are all that matter, not your side. So whenever I'm telling people, don't give your side, don't fill out these affidavits, because most people don't even understand an affidavit is irrelevant until trial. But here's the flip side of that. When you're exercising your right to remain silent, you are forcing the accuser to exercise their opportunity to prove that you did something and to prove everything they are saying. Now, what I'm going to do is go into this last commercial. That's why I want to make sure this little section was kind of quick. But when I go into this last section, I'm going to get a little deeper because I want you to actually feel what it is that I'm giving you. I want you to feel what I'm feeling. I want you to hear what I'm hearing. I want you to make sure you're marinating on what it is that I'm giving to you. So, here's our last commercial break. Welcome back. So, today, when I talk about understanding, and even in the context of remaining silent, I talked about or used the word exercise. Because that is the one thing that you're doing every time you're going out and you're putting more forth or setting forth your side, your stance, your defense. It's exercising discipline. It's exercising your right to remain silent. Because I know a lot of times most people can't do that for whatever reason. Because maybe it's a programming issue, maybe it's an error in the syntax, or maybe it's a glitch in the matrix. I don't know. But I know I've learned that I can laugh. I can laugh at it because I know for the fact that all they're there to do is to agitate me. So it's up to me to allow the agitation. And at the end of the day, when you're exercising, that's putting yourself in the best possible stance to be victorious. And here's where I want to give you a little context. Because Malloy v. Hogan, 378 U.S. 1, 1964. The 14th Amendment secures against state invasion the same privilege that the 5th Amendment guarantees against federal infringement. You hear me talk all the time about everybody has to abide by federal law. Why? Because federal law is the supreme law of the land. This is where you have the context of there is no spoon. I want to say that one more time. The context of there is no spoon. Everybody's looking for a means of getting over or bending the spoon. The young man even told Keanu, that's impossible. What you must understand that is your mind that's bending. Because there is no spoon. And in the context of law, if only federal law matters, how do we have state laws? There is no spoon. There is no state law. Because only federal law matters. Statutes, codes, and ordinances are safety issues. Everything at state level, aside from damage to personal property, which have those that coincide with federal law, don't exist. Those are things that, whether you like it or don't like it, that's how it's written. Because if it does not coincide with federal law, it does not exist. There is no spoon. Now, so when we're talking about those guarantees, because you'll also hear the 14th Amendment being the enforcer on the state because of the supreme law of the land. You're going to hear me talk about that more, as even in the Fighting Words Doctrine, we talked about how the selective incorporation doctrine was enforced through the 14th Amendment. And these overturning of state statutes that did not coincide with federal law were set up. Because the 14th Amendment is the protection of not only what they would call 14th Amendment citizens, but it's the protection and the enforcement of the treaties, those agreements for non-citizens, because those are the things that are set forth by the original governing body. The problem is they don't teach you the syntax of it or the context of how they are applied in our everyday life. Now, going deeper into Malloy v. Hogan, 378 U.S. 1, 1964. The right of a person to remain silent unless he chooses to speak in unfettered exercise of his own will, and to not suffer penalty. And here's the great part about that. Because we actually had an opportunity to understand something. I talked about contracts. Because anytime we talk about a contract, we talk about the existence of duress. Duress is something that voids a contract. We also talked about how contracts can be done verbally or orally. And, I've had several oral contracts that I enjoyed, but at the end of the day, it was unfettered exercise of his own will. Because it was a choice that I made, not one that was forced upon me. Because when we're talking about unfettered means unbothered, uninfluenced. And these are things that are not available to us on most instances. Because just like I talked about the case here in El Paso, where the young man spoke of, and I believe it was video 23 of 100, where the El Paso cop told the dude all you had to do was participate in the investigation. When in fact that we know for a fact, Florida v. Royer says I don't have to participate in your investigation. United States Constitution that young man, that police officer swore to uphold and defend states I have the right to remain silent. And even Malloy v. Hogan says the right for a person to remain silent unless chooses to speak in unfettered exercise of his own will. His rights then are infringed on if he is forced to speak. Because again, when you have something that's not voluntary, we have even a running joke talking about Chris Brown. And we always talk, no means no. And then we'll talk about Chris Brown. Because Chris even accepts the joke of it. Because he understands the context of what happened at that time in his life. But the way the world sees it is another way. This young man here in El Paso stated he was taught that people don't have the right to remain silent. That people must comply with an order that a police officer gives. And the problem is, Terry v. Ohio states that even giving an oral instant direction without a crime is a violation. I don't have to be a part of your investigation. I don't have to help you until you decide or till you determine that I am part of your investigation, that I am part of the crime. I don't have to participate. You have to gain a probable cause. And these are the things where I don't have to give my side, because most people don't even know. You don't have to provide an alibi. You don't have to. That's not something that you need to do. That's your choice if you want to. Because again, you're not a police officer. You have no obligation to police. And this is one of the things where I talk about all the time, because until you decide that, you know what, enough is enough, and enough is just too damn much, you have to decide that you're going to be in the number to plant your feet and say, you know what, yeah, I'm not going to work for you. I'm not doing anything illegal. So yeah, I'm finna stand up for it. I'm going to fight back for it. And I should not have a penalty addressed to me just because you're out here not applying law but seeking revenue. And the worst things that you can do, the absolute worst thing that you can do in telling your side is that it can lead to self-incrimination. And I'm gonna give it a hood lingo. Sitting up here dry snitching on yourself. Sitting up here dry snitching because you trying to tell on somebody else, you end up telling on yourself. Shut up. And then you have a portion of it to where you're sitting out here trying to prove your side. And the only thing you're doing is adding things that you now have to prove. Whoops. Why is that? Why do it now I have to prove something? Simply because of this. Anytime you give a statement, it has to be supported by proof. If not, it is stricken from the record as hearsay. Oh, that's a video I did like 5 of. Hearsay. Shut up. Stop talking. Because a lot of times, I always tell people, you'll sit up there and talk yourself into something that you can't get out of. I've actually seen people talk themselves into tickets. I've watched it. Because these people have the inability to shut up. Stop talking. Make him do his job. Because even in sales, one thing that we learn, whoever talks first loses. The question is posed and whoever talks first loses. The problem is, I was a good salesman. Because I understood the art of shutting the fuck up. Unfortunately, it's not something I exercise a lot right now, considering I do all these videos and podcasts. And yeah, don't do it a whole lot now. But this is something that's not only a blessing, it's a privilege. It's something that you need to understand how to indulge in. Because the effects of it can be detrimental not only to your liberty, but to your life experience. Because being a better listener allows you to not only see what's in front of you, but it allows you to adapt to what's being laid out in front of you. Because you're seeing the world at a different light. And these are the things that you need to actually be better people. And lastly, by telling your side, you're probably going to provide the accuser with evidence to use against you. What? Because now y'all have a story that matches. May not match fully, but it matches. So now it allows them context. Because I'm pretty sure you've heard 1,000 times. Everything you say can and will be held against you. Generally not going to be in a court of law, but it'll be in a courtroom. Or in some instance where your liberty is at stake. And even these voluntary statements, such as confessions, or things that are done through casual conversations. That's why they're allowed to have these casual encounters. But it's also your choice to even talk to them. And if you're choosing to talk to them, you're telling them it's okay to use your shit against you. And I constantly tell you, you cannot argue with yourself. Because no matter what happens, if you're standing in front of a mirror arguing, guess who wins? You. But the problem is, guess who also loses? You. Because at some point, arguing with yourself, there's going to be something that shows as a discrepancy. And even in these contexts, when you write up a writ of affidavit because you want to tell your side, that affidavit now becomes a statement to which you must provide proof. Because now you take the side of the accuser. But here's also the flip side of that. If you are the accuser, remember, the defense don't have to say anything. They don't have to turn over anything. And if you don't have it, which you're not in general cases, if you're just writing affidavits and sending them out, you're probably not going to have what's necessary to win at that time that you're writing this affidavit up. Because once it's filed, it's part of the record. And now you need to prove everything that's in that affidavit. And they don't have to turn over anything that you don't have proof of. Because they're the defendants. And only the accuser has to show proof. In order for it not to be hearsay, there has to be actual evidence. But see, now, even when you provide an alibi, I'm going to go into later the cases of why you can't even not tell them about your alibi witnesses. Once you give them an alibi, you have to prove that alibi. Because if not, it's hearsay and inadmissible. I'm going to say that one more time. You're telling your side. If you don't have proof, at the time you're giving it, it becomes hearsay, which is inadmissible. So now the only thing you've done was take your side and taking it off the table. You've done more harm than you did good to you. You're hurting. You become your own worst enemy. And these are the things that I attempt to help people not do. But it's something you have to do as far as exercising. It's one of those things that you have to do when it comes to understanding what it is that you are trying to get. Understanding the rules of law have nothing to do with what you have been taught. These are the things that I give you. I'm giving you the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why, and the how. Those are the most important because those are the ones that are generally left out. The why and the how. Why do you shut up? Because it's going to be used against you whether you want it to or not. How? Because keeping your lip shut makes them do their job properly, which gives you exactly what it is you want, because we know they've been doing it the wrong way for a very long time to the point to where they think it is correct. So understand that. Just understand that. And one of the things that we talk about a lot of times is implied or inferred. And these are words that you will hear. And those are just synonyms for presumption. Because when I first started, one of the things I wrote up a motion that I would initially file. Because it was one of those where I understood the words inference. And I revoked all presumptions. Because I needed the right to be innocent until proven guilty. I needed that. Mentally, I needed that. Until I understood the aspects of it. Because I don't give a shit about guilt or innocence. Because just like when you're talking about something, I'm going to get back on topic. But when you're talking about something such as the impeachment trial of the president, I spoke about him not being impeached a little more than a year and a half ago when Mueller was actually initiating the investigation. I told you he wasn't going to be impeached. I explained to you why he wasn't going to be impeached. And it was easy because it had nothing to do with law. Doesn't mean he was innocent. Doesn't mean he didn't do it. But it's understanding law and the optics of what needs to be set for. Now, it's also the reason why when someone's sent to prison for the wrong reason or sent to prison through whatever reason, and then they get out and come to find out they're innocent, it's the same reason the state can't apologize. And if they do, they just cut a check. They just cut a check big enough for you to shut up. That's it. This is the exact same thing I needed. Because even in the racketeering trial, we were found not guilty. Doesn't mean we're innocent. Doesn't mean we didn't do something. But it does mean that we weren't found guilty. Now, the great part about that is that there's this beautiful thing called double jeopardy. Double jeopardy attached on all levels for all of those alleged allegations. Because it's just like when we're talking to our significant other and we're saying, look, we can't keep bringing up the past. I've been exonerated for it. You can't keep bringing it up. But you did this. No. You forgive me for it. I've been exonerated. I got double jeopardy attached. This is the exact same thing. Because once double jeopardy attached, you can't bring it up again. Doesn't matter anymore. Because it's already been done. But understanding that remaining silent and making them do their job properly is a form of revoking their presumption. Because now they actually have to do some investigating, which we all know they're not trained to do. Now we know that they're going to do the intimidation tactics because that's all they have. Why? Because they need you to be an active player in your own depredation. Understand that. They need you to convict you. They need you to be okay with what they're doing, whether it's proper or improper. So if you take you out the equation, the only thing that's left is them. And then you stand up and fight because you know what it is. You're not fighting for your right to party, but you're fighting for your right to be free. You're fighting for your right to be left alone. You're fighting for your right for them to do what they're supposed to be doing. You're fighting for your right to say, hey, you getting this huge check. I need you to earn that check. And that's what this is. Because once you tell your side, you are then obligated by hearsay to show proof or evidence of everything it is that you've said. Reginald Copeland did not have proof to his life being in danger. Reginald Copeland went out and created a situation where his life could have possibly been put in danger. But at the same time, Reginald Copeland had no way out. Reginald Copeland put himself in a horrible position and then didn't want to do what was necessary to have things done. But when you are put in those positions, if you are not the instigator of it, if you are not the victim, remain silent. Make them do their job. If you are the one that's initiating the entire incident, then you allow them to do what it is you call their ass there to do. Because if you're going to contact them, understand what it is that you're doing. Understand what level of justice that you're looking for. Other than that, you shouldn't even be having a conversation with them, because everything you do and say will be held against you for all eternity, regardless of if you're exonerated from it or not. Because having these conversations, not exercising, puts your physical in danger. It puts your economics in danger. Because we know they're not doing anything in the limelight of law. They are doing things for the extortion of revenue. If you're not going to participate in it, don't do things that offer them an opportunity to be vexed. Don't do things that offer them an opportunity to have a conversation with you. Don't do things that, one, bring them into your presence, and then once it happens, don't expect them to do anything other than what they are you know them to do. Because just like I do, I'm going to give it one more time, because I've been giving this for the past couple of weeks. And I'm not sure if people are understanding. But I know if I give it to you a couple, 2-3 times, that it'll kind of sink in. And it's the story of the snake. The young man goes outside because it's freezing outside, snowing. And he grabs the snake because he sees the snake is frozen. Brings snake inside, warms snake up, feeds the snake. Make sure the snake is nourished back to health. Now the snake is healthy. Snake bites him. He goes, why? Why would you bite me? I'm helping you. Snake looks him in the eye and says, you knew I was a snake when I brought you in here. And that goes back to the context of doing the same thing and expecting a different result is insane. these are the things that where we change insanity. Why? Because we recognize what's being done and what's not being done. This is where we take over who we are, where we are, and what we are. Because if you're going to understand the aspects of being free, going to understand the aspect of self-governing, you have to put in the practice of both of those. And you also have to be willing to accept the consequences as they come. And I think that's where a lot of us fall off at. Because we are enjoying the fruits of our labors to a point to where sometimes they're done in excess. But when we get to the point we're not trying to get over, but we're trying to get by, that's when we have to understand what it is that we're looking at. So don't expect a snake not to be a snake just because you're helping it. But also, don't expect them to not be a snake just because you invited them in your house. And that's all I got for today. I thank you guys for listening. Today is a little shorter than usual, but we're going to get into longer podcasts. We're also going to get into a longer feature of possibly 2 hours because I'm enjoying this more and I'm having more to have a conversation about because I think it's time for growth for me as well. So I thank you guys that have been supporting the podcast. I thank you guys that have been going over and supporting the Patreon. And I also thank you guys that have been supporting the channel. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep growing. I thank you. I love you guys. And until next time.
The shaking colossus.
I'm going to show you how great I am.